Hi, Joe. Welcome to the Senti Sun podcast. So just to kick us off, I would love to hear about your journey with Gousto. And obviously you've experienced some kind of crazy rocket ship growth over the past few years, and I think essentially become a household name in the UK. When did you join? How has it been? What's your experience?
Yeah, so I'd say when I first joined Gousto, I'd say it's definitely far from a household name at that point. So I joined back in 2014 when there were a grand total of 13 of us in the business as a whole. So obviously a very different landscape to the one that we're listed in, that we're kind of living in now. But initially joined Gousto with zero experience in customer care, if I'm being completely transparent. So I joined as a customer care agent initially, and I've been very fortunate to be with the business for 7 years. So I guess a little bit about the reason I joined Gousto. I think when I first walked into the offices, it was this kind of name that I'd never heard of before, but I very quickly fell in love with the brand and everything that we stood for. I think we had an incredibly passionate team, which is something that we've managed to keep hold of throughout the last 7 years. And as you mentioned, we've seen incredible growth throughout that period. So I guess my role in Gousto has obviously changed over that time. And obviously I've got the luxury now of leading the customer care team as a whole, a bit far larger it was when I first joined in the days where it was hard phones on the desk with 3 others answering calls. So it's been an incredible journey. And it's, as you say, Gousto is very much seen as a rocket ship in the industry with plenty of change, which is an exciting beast to be part of.
Nice, cool, yeah, crazy experience. So it was 13 when you joined. What is it now?
Yeah, so we're just over 1,000 at the moment. So kind of to give a little bit of an indication of growth. So as I say, when I first joined, it was 13. In 2020, we started with 500 people in the business and went up to 1,000 by the end of the year. And our current plans will see us land at 2,000 by the end of this year. So again, hopefully gives you a little bit of an idea of the journey we're on and the rapid growth. And I think I often say it's a very Gousto-centric thing that when you ask someone how long they've been at Gousto, you tend to answer in terms of kind of how many boxes or meals you were delivering in that specific period. So when I first joined, we were delivering a grand total of 300 deliveries a week, which at that time we thought was a good number that we were on, and we're excited to see certain milestones such as 1,000. But to put that into numbers at the moment, in Q1 alone, we delivered 25 million meals this year. So obviously it kind of shows that scale that we've grown. It's been an incredible journey.
That is crazy. And so you have, were there just 3 agents in the customer support team when you first joined? Or was there a leader throughout this journey that helped you grow, or did you have to figure it all out on your own?
Yeah, so when we first joined, there were 3 of us in the customer care team. And like I say, it seems like a grand term for what we were at that period in time. There's 3 of us around the desk, huddled around kind of hard phones, speaking to customers in the best way we could. But we've been incredibly lucky. I think the leaders at Gousto, even at such an early stage, have always been kind of a big inspiration to everyone across the business. And I think one of the things that made me very quickly fall in love with Gousto was how closely we work together. So Timo, the CEO, alongside the kind of rest of the leadership team, it was very much a one team mentality. I think it's kind of great of a team in a kind of business sense, but actually on a personal level, kind of leaders you can aspire to and lean towards from their experience. So yeah, there's definitely tons of talent within Gousto, and everyone's willing to help each other on their own development journeys.
Nice. I think it makes the success of a company, I guess, having a culture like that.
Absolutely.
So one thing that I've read, and it's actually in the founder Timo's LinkedIn profile, is that Gousto isn't a food company or a data company that loves food. What has that meant for you, I guess, over the period of time?
Yes, often we call ourselves a tech and data company that operate within the food market. I think one of the kind of key things about that is that tech and data is that undercurrent of every single team within the business. So like I say, we've got a team of over 200 in tech at the moment, which is obviously a great privilege to have that many talented people working across various disciplines within tech, from kind of developers, engineering managers, data scientists, and those are the guys who have really enabled us to get to the stage we are now. The one thing I constantly heard saying internally as well was that we're very fortunate to have dedicated developers, data scientists, analysts, and those are the ones who have really enabled us, even within the customer care space, to really differentiate ourselves and to be as efficient as we are at the moment.
So there's a cross-functional tech team that really helps every team get better and improve.
Yeah, so we're lucky. We've got a kind of completely dedicated tech team towards customer care. So we're set up in a tribe structure within Gousto. So that means that we split the business into 3 based on kind of supply, growth, and areas like menu. So we sit within the growth tribe, which is very much customer focused. And within that, we have squads or teams essentially that are focused on different areas within that. So within the customer care space, we're very fortunate to have a squad that purely focus on the customer experience. And when we say customer experience, that can be quite a broad term that applies to kind of every element of the business. But I mean, specifically the customer support experience. So from the point in which a customer needs to contact us, we have a team purely dedicated to making that process as efficient as possible.
Cool. I feel like those a few things you mentioned there show how much like customer support is valued at Gousto, and like I guess being in a more growth team rather than like an operations team, like being seen as that is a massive one. But also having resources dedicated to the tech and CX of your department. That's
exactly it. And I think it's a really interesting point around kind of customer care sitting within growth, because one of the areas that we see is that actually customer care is around helping to retain customers, of course, and especially in a subscription-based business primarily. We're not purely subscription, but a large number of our customers are subscribers. Being there to solve customers' issues when they do come up is a huge lever to drive retention. So it's something that we've looked long and hard at, and we've fortunately been able to look at the correlation between when a customer has a positive interaction with the customer care team versus maybe a not so positive customer interaction. We see a kind of tangible increase in retention. So what that means is we really put ourselves in a position of proving ourselves to be a value generator, rather than in some businesses where customer care may be seen as more of a cost center. So it puts us in a really strong position that actually we look more at how can we deliver the most value within customer care, of course, at a sustainable operating cost, rather than pursuing lower cost for the sake of lower cost. So it puts us in a very fortunate position.
It's a really interesting point. I think it seems like a really hard thing to do, to tie what your work to like outcomes of the other areas of the business cares about, like the revenue and things. If you can do that, then you can really prove yourself.
Yeah, I think that becomes incredibly powerful within its own right as well, because even when you get down to various levels within that, on a departmental level, it obviously means that we can start to look at strategic initiatives, or we can add value. But actually on a more day-to-day basis, it really means that our agents have got direct visibility on how their daily interactions with customers feed into wider business goals. So it really helps with everyone understanding how they play their part in driving the business forwards.
And the morale of knowing that you're also respected within the business is really important.
Absolutely.
That's cool. So you also recently won like the European Contact Center and Customer Service Awards. Is that right? 2 years in a row?
2 years in a row, thankfully. I think we're very, very fortunate to have done so, and we're something that we're incredibly proud of. I think it's always one thing internally being recognised for the work you're doing, but to be interrogated by your peers in the industry and for them to recognise the efforts is always something that's exceptionally rewarding.
Yeah, definitely. What was the secret to that success like? And do you think the data and technology has been quite key to that?
Yeah, I'll say it's definitely key to that. It's always one of those difficult things. Obviously, customer kind of care centers, there's so many different areas that all contribute towards running efficiently. I think we definitely see tech and data as one of the ways in which we differentiate ourselves. But at the core of it, it's always going to be the people, which is kind of enabling us to get to that. But it's really about how can we use tech and data to really unlock the capabilities of our team. So what I mean by that is, if I was to think 4 or 5, I guess, kind of core areas where I feel like are the kind of key areas of our success, I think on a more operational level, before we even get to the tech side of things, it's around creating as flexible and operating model as we potentially could, because Gousto is a very kind of fast growth business. As part of that, it means that inbound volumes are never particularly stable. We see peaks and troughs as most businesses do, but we try and build resilience in our model against that. So even within our UK operations, we've got kind of various shift patterns across our multiple sites in the UK. We use kind of a remote working team, which is obviously a funny thing to say at the moment, because I think a lot of people have been used to kind of transition to remote working, but we've had a remote working team for the last 3 to 4 years who kind of work more part-time hours and really bolster the kind of busier shift patterns within the week. So when we kind of see a high spike in contacts, and also we work very closely with external support providers globally. So we've got kind of very close working relationships with a couple of partners. And what that means is it really gives us that resilience to scale our headcount up and down to meet customer demand. So I think there's a lot to be said around kind of building that flexibility in the model. But within that, it's just the kind of people side of things more generally. So we put a huge focus on kind of training and development within the team. So going all the way from lots of emphasis on onboarding training when people first come into the business, and not necessarily just the training that you'd expect around how to efficiently handle chats and calls, but actually living and breathing the kind of customer life cycle. So everyone gets the option to get a kind of free Gousto box when they first start. Day one is all about familiarizing yourself with the website, the customer journey. So we really try and keep it customer centric from the start, and through to kind of really kind of heavy use of QA within the team to kind of celebrate successes of what's gone well and kind of any areas of development. and kind of providing that support and personal development for the team. And I think what that really feeds into is trying to drive team engagement. Team engagement is obviously something that most businesses are focused on. We are really intentional with our efforts towards team engagement. So we take a very data-driven approach to engagement as well. So we've got kind of monthly surveys in the team where we can really identify areas of improvement for engagement. And it means that we've been very fortunate that team eNPS, which is how we measure it, so the net promoter score tends to be quite considerably higher than the industry average. And I think the way in which we've achieved that is really fostering internal progression. So it's something that we're incredibly proud of within Goustos, that I could genuinely say I think we're one of the best companies to join in the UK if you're looking for progression, because we really value our people and really kind of progressing people within that. So even within our customer care management team, 70% of the management team started as agents initially, myself included. So we kind of really try and foster the talent internally, and even in the way in which we approach engagement scores. So we run forums with our agents to really dig into the detail of the engagement scores. So it isn't a kind of hands-off approach where we look at engagement scores and behind curtains come up with ideas on how to improve it. We involve the agents from the start in kind of how can we continue to drive engagement even further and make it truly collaborative. So yeah, I think that was my initial point. I think when we talk about tech and data, the thing I'm always keen to call out at first is that it's very much used to empower agents, but I guess more directly how we do that. So as I mentioned from the top, and you'll hear me say it over and over again, is that we're incredibly fortunate to have such a talented tech team working towards us. So a couple of years back, we kind of looked at our contact mix and really identified that the vast majority of our complaints were coming around much simpler queries. So it's generally an item's missing from my box, or kind of an item's damaged in my box. So generally there were very kind of simple queries. And although they're relatively emotive for that customer, of course, the actual solutions to those were kind of quite simple in essence. So what we decided to do was actually build self-service tools to enable our customers to really serve those queries themselves. So one thing that we knew in the industry is that the appetite for self-service has been increasing. I think it's something that most customers, or most companies, are aware of. But actually, we looked at it through the lens of how can we use self-service to improve customer experience. So we intentionally never use the word deflection or anything along those lines. We think that's the wrong approach. What we're trying to do is really empower our customers to be able to self-serve, because we know that they value the efficiency of self-service. So being able to go through getting in contact with us to getting a resolution within 30 seconds. So we targeted a number of flows within that, and we're very fortunate that we're now automating over 50% of all of the contacts that come into our centre. And actually, within those, we're seeing incredibly high CSAT scores within that. So we see it as a win-win-win. And what I mean by that is, from a customer point of view, it means super quick resolutions, 24/7. They get the kind of response they like, but we never shoehorn them to use the self-service tools. We'll encourage it, but we always make sure that humans are available. So we almost make the tools so attractive to use that customers want to use them, rather than hiding our agents away and trying to force customers through automation. We really see it as value add. From an agent point of view, I guess what it means is that we're actually kind of automating a lot of our simpler queries, which means that our agents can really focus on what they do best, and that's solving the most complicated cases using their expertise rather than handling the more repetitive queries as well. So it obviously means that agents are more engaged and they can really add value. And from a business point of view, obviously it's one of the keys to enable us to scale alongside the business without necessarily scaling our headcount at the same rate. So it's been one of those kind of core developments, which I think has been key to our success, alongside many others, which have enabled us to rapidly scale to the business needs without necessarily having to rapidly scale our team while still delivering world-class customer care.
Could you give us an example of that win-win-win situation? Like, I guess the customer journey, what's the issue they're having when they come in?
Yeah, so if we went through the example of a customer who's missing a carrot to pick one of many, you obviously you can come into the app and you instantly get a kind of options of how you'd like to solve your query. So we've got kind of very intricate help center with lots of articles on how to self-serve, but actually we've got a specifically designed flow which is inbuilt by our tech team, so it's proprietary. And essentially a customer can go in, select which recipe they've had a kind of issue with, which ingredient was impacted, give us any details they'd like around the experience they issued. And then there's obviously lots of fun magic that happens behind the scenes where we'll kind of look at eligibility for customers, because obviously we need to make sure that we want to make these tools as accessible as possible, but we need to prevent any potential misuse within the tool. But one of the key things we've got behind that as well is we'll actually offer customers compensation there and then within the flow. And the customer's got the option to choose to either accept or if they would like to speak to a customer care agent instead, they've got the ability to do so. But the actual technology behind that is super sophisticated. So we'll look at kind of what's the importance of the ingredient that was impacted, has the customer had any complaints previously, and it takes into account tons of different factors, and they'll come up with a bespoke compensation specifically for that customer as well. So again, it's something where we see super high acceptance from customers, but obviously at the same time it means that we're reducing the amount of contacts coming through to agents so they can spend their time on more complex cases.
Wow. Yeah. That's the ideal customer experience, I think, to be able to get your refund when you've had an issue without having to like convince someone or to share your entire story or whatever it is.
Yeah, it's kind of building trust within customers as well, because the one thing I'm always conscious of is that kind of 7 o'clock in the evening, someone's missing a carrot. Of course, they want to inform us and be compensated for that, but you're cooking your dinner, you might not necessarily want to be on the phone to customer service as you're trying to do it. As much as the kind of agent experience is super slick as well, of course, but actually sometimes people just want to get a quick resolution to an issue and make sure that we're aware of it. So there's obviously probably feeds into the other area that I didn't mention is all of these kind of data points then feed through to ourselves. And I think that's probably another way in which customer care teams can truly add values by the sharing of insights around the rest of the business. So I'm sure as most people in the industry in a similar boat, you sit on this wealth of data and mixture of structured, unstructured data, really creating value by sharing that in the most effective way with the rest of the business. So how can you use this data to understand, are there any kind of emerging trends of issues that are coming through at the moment? So we've got alerting dashboards internally so that if specific types of contacts increase beyond an expected value, then we'll send alerts directly to that team to let them know that we're seeing the spike in contacts. And so it allows them to essentially dig into the root cause of an issue immediately so that we can solve the issue for any kind of future customers straight away.
So it automatically pings those teams and they can start to...
Yeah, that's exactly it. So to talk about the kind of alerting side of it initially, essentially kind of analysts have built a model where we can predict how many contacts we expect to receive for specific topics. And we look at historic averages, build in a little bit of a kind of buffer. So if we see a deviation beyond what we expect to a certain threshold, then the system will automatically send alerts to the relevant teams to kind of let them know there's an issue occurring and provide kind of high level insights as to what might be driving it. But I guess the way in which we make that truly actionable is that we're a very data-driven company, so obviously we want to share as much data as possible, but also we really want to humanize that data as well. So we've got a dedicated team of subject matter experts in customer care. So they'll work very closely with the relevant teams and help them deep dive into the issue and give them anecdotal evidence of the contacts they've had, the team feedback, and really help them delve into root cause. Because obviously, again, win-win all around. It means that the quicker from a customer care point of view we can share the insights with the rest of the business, the quicker they can then resolve it for the customer. So it's better for customer experience. It reduces contacts. So again, it's one of those kind of win-win situations. The more data we can share, the better.
And our teams across your business, I don't know if like whoever's in charge of the carrots or whatever, do they care? Do they listen? And they're keen to fight this problem with you?
Yeah, absolutely. So we've got kind of tons of examples. So we regularly have touch bases with almost every team across the business. So I think essentially where we're very lucky is that we've got very aligned goals as a business. So we use OKRs, and actually when we look at our primary metrics as a business, we obsess over customer experience, and our way of measuring that is through NPS. And obviously there's a huge amount of variables that filter into that. So actually as a business, we've all got the joint objectives about, yes, we want to scale quickly, but we do it by delivering amazing customer experience. And again, complaints around ingredients, obviously that's always going to be a primary driver of dissatisfaction. So kind of we handle it in the most effective way possible to improve customer experience when it does happen. But actually, I think where customer care add a ton of value is more that point before customer care. So taking those insights, sharing it with the rest of the business so we can really understand root cause analysis and drive improvements immediately. But I think that's one side of it. I think that's a very short-term lens is when issues happen, how do we identify it and fix it? The other side of it is within the insights, there's obviously a lot of asks from customers about proposition changes they'd like to see. So vegetarian, vegan options, or the whole range of these delivery slots. So as well as using it to drive short-term fixes to problems, actually, how do we leverage the data to drive more strategic propositional changes? And I think that's where it gets truly exciting. And by making that data accessible by the rest of the business, you can almost keep that voice of the customer at the heart of every decision.
Yeah, wow. Yeah, definitely. I mean, definitely agreed on that. But that's an interesting way to put it, like the short-term and the long-term fixes. I feel like I don't know, if you have customers who are as engaged and are willing to help and suggest things, and it's sort of like a competitive advantage to have your internal customer insight that no one else can use, that you can drive your own product. forward. Like it's quite a good competitive advantage, I guess.
That's exactly it. And I think it's a really interesting term because we've got some kind of principles internally within customer care. And I think we really want to build a customer care function that is so good that we can leverage it as a competitive advantage. And what we mean by that is both in terms of the customer support experience, as I mentioned. So how can we make it as easy as possible for customers to get in contact with us? Also, how can we make it as accessible as possible for customers to get in contact with us? And that sometimes could have split schools of thought, but actually what we want to do is reduce contact through the lens of improving customer experience, but actually we want to make ourselves as accessible for customers as possible. So those customers who may have experienced an issue, we want to encourage them to get in contact with us because that's when we can truly understand an issue, fix it and drive retention for that customer. So I see our role in customer care as helping to resolve issues as quickly as possible, making ourselves as accessible as possible for other customers whilst actually sharing that data with a wider business. So as you say, we can kind of drive the proposition with a truly customer lens to drive that future proposition.
Wow. Yeah. Well, no wonder you won the Contact Center of the Year with this mission. I guess my next question was going to be, when did you start? Have you thought like this from the beginning, or when did you start implementing? Or like, what point did you have 50% deflection?
I'd love to say we managed to kind of get 50% of queries self-served from day one. If I did say that, I'd definitely be lying. I think it's been a long journey. So I think at first, I say challenge with the word intentionally was when we first developed these tools, it was around understanding, can we actually build these self-service tools without adding friction to the customer experience? Because I think one of the concerns you always have with these is there a customer demand for self-service? And kind of for our preliminary research, we saw that there definitely was an appetite. And as I mentioned previously, the market was obviously shifting towards self-service options. So we kind of ventured into it in that sense, but we take a very iterative approach within Gousto. And what I mean by that is we kind of put in a MVP solution, look at kind of customer appetite towards it. Has it had a good reception by customers? Are we looking at, is our automation increasing by the amount we expect? And like I say, the most important metric we have as one of our short-term metrics is what's the customer satisfaction look like? Because it's the one thing I'll rehash over and over again is that we don't build automation for the sake of automation, and we'll never drive automation if it's going to be at the risk of lowering costs, but also worsening the customer experience. We always look at it through the lens of building tools that enhance the customer experience, and kind of a byproduct of that is actually helping us to control our costs as well. So that's one of those truly great examples. But yeah, I think we've definitely over the last 2 to 3 years taken lots of heavy lifting to get us to 50%. And again, there's lots of different approaches. It's been around building trust in the tooling. So how can we make it accessible to a wider range of customers once that we're confident it's having the kind of benefits we expect? How can we continue to look at what flows do we have within that for customers that's available? And even down to more recently, when we look at how can we drive customer experience within that? So actually personalizing the copy within the flow. So we actually acknowledge the customer specifically. So if it's an ingredient that's particularly key to the meal, actually let's be upfront and honest and acknowledge that with the customer that we know this is one of the primary ingredients of the meal. We are very sorry. We're going to fix this for you and here's the compensation. Or in the rare cases, a customer may have multiple issues. We're really sorry that this is the second issue you've had within the last 2 to 3 weeks. Kind of we acknowledge it, we are working on fixing it. So really understanding how can we take a really personalized approach to the way in which we drive automation.
Wow, yeah. I think what makes that like really special is like using the lens of customer experience versus cost cutting and really caring about that side of things.
Absolutely.
Okay, I was going to ask you about all the other kind of tech stack that you have, but I guess there's a few things that people will already be very aware of, like I guess like WFM tech stack. What do you think are the key kind of layers you need to get in place if you're about to prepare for like fast growth? What are the key things that are needed?
Yeah, and I know a lot of this will be kind of known in the industry, but I think the bread and butter is making sure that actually your customer care ticketing system is set up the most effectively. As I say, it all boils down to agents and how to empower agents. So actually from a ticketing system point of view, just making sure that you've done everything you can to not only drive customer experience if you're using automation tools, that like put a kind of laser focus on agents as well. So actually when the contacts are coming through to agents, how can you make the ticketing system UI as clear as possible, as clean as possible? Because what you really want is your agents, in my opinion, to be focusing on how do we deliver the best solution to this customer rather than how can we open 1, tab 2 and navigate these systems. It takes your focus away from what we should be doing. And that's really kind of emphasizing with the customer, or kind of empathizing with the customer, I should say. So I think having that ticketing system in place is obviously the core, and I think that's going to be no big surprise. You mentioned around WFM as well. obviously WFM is going to be incredibly important for a number of reasons, especially as you're rapidly scaling. One, making sure that, again, you're empowering agents. Most WFM tools will allow agents to get easy visibility of their performance and all that sort of side of things. Just making sure that as you're scaling, you're really managing to understand how your contact volumes changing. Are you seeing changes in your contact mix? Are you seeing changes in the times that customers are contacting you? Because you go through periods of rapid growth that changes far more frequently than you'd like, and almost week on week you've got a different kind of setup. So actually using that from a forecasting point of view to drive efficiencies and making sure that you're hitting your service levels. And I guess kind of one other one, agent facing point of view, is QA as well. And I've kind of mentioned it previously. I think it's not necessarily kind of an operational efficiency driver in the sense of like a WFM system, but QA is incredibly important, especially as you're rapidly scaling. The chances are that you're scaling your headcount to be able to kind of cope with that as well, alongside driving your automation. So it's obviously incredibly important to make sure that the customers always expect, obviously, individuality within every conversation, but you want to make sure that you're getting that consistency of the Gousto tone of voice in our instance, but ensuring that consistency along the way. I guess the only other thought that popped in my mind around that as well is making sure you've got the right mechanics to support agents within that. So making sure, whether it's for a self-service option for a knowledge base or the like, kind of making sure that your agents have got knowledge at their fingertips where they can very quickly understand policy changes or whatever that may be. But also, in our sense, we always use a combination of asynchronous and synchronous support channels. So for less urgent inquiries where the agents need support, they can use Slack or whatever other tooling that you may use to ask questions to the groups, almost kind of crowdfund ideas, or to managers, senior agents, but also having that live escalation support internally as well, so that if you're on a call or a chat and you're having a particularly difficult conversation, then you can throw through to our senior agent team or your manager or whatever that may be and get that support. So always important in my eyes to make sure that we're always focusing on customer experience, but we need to make sure that you're equally focused on agent experience to support that customer experience.
Yeah, definitely. I think, like you said earlier about engagement, the more engaged and less bored and more empowered agents are, the better that experience is for customers too. I guess kind of a final question. Is there any technology that you wish you had, if that makes sense? Like, what's your kind of biggest problem at the moment? And is there tech that you think is not really available, but you need to build? Or
it's a really good question, because obviously the landscape is always changing. And what I mean by that is I think there's endless use cases for kind of NLP in particular, so like natural language processing. So either from an analytical point of view or from an application point of view. So I know there's kind of new tools coming onto market where using kind of voice recognition, speech to text, NLP, whatever variations you want to use, where actually you can do 100% QA or live coaching for agents, or some really cool tools on the market where you can almost live listen to all calls and understand when a call might be escalating, or whispering to agents advice on how to handle a call. So hard to say a specific solution, but I think there's an incredible amount of opportunity. And again, I feel like I'm rehashing the same message, but there's an incredible amount of opportunity in the driving automation from a customer point of view. And I think there's tons and tons of applications that we can talk from, obviously chatbots, IVR, voice recognition, all of that sort of fun stuff. But actually, I think there's really interesting use cases around agent support within the kind of automation space. So how can you really support all of your agents, and rather than taking a small portion of QA, let's say 5 to 10%, suddenly you can QA all of your calls and really be there to support your agents. So there's tons and tons of kind of technologies I think we'd always love, but I think those are the main ones that spring to mind.
Okay, interesting. Yeah, I don't know why 100% QA is always been, it's been floated around our office so many times. It's probably come from you guys.
More than likely, I ask a lot of questions. I'll be very demanding with what we like.
Yeah. But that would be cool. I think that's a really great idea. If, like there's a lot of chatbots out there right now that when the customer asks a question, it suggests them a knowledge-based article. But why not, when the agent is having trouble answering a question, why doesn't it pop up with an article saying this could be the way to solve this problem?
That's exactly it. The same technology, just a slightly different use case.
Yeah, definitely. So do you have like a knowledge base internally for agents?
Yeah, we do, and it's something that we kind of maintain both through agents themselves. So one of the challenges with Gousto is that with such a fast growth business, what it means is that there's tons and tons of changes happening all the time. So it's obviously always incredibly difficult to make sure we keep up to date with all the changes around the business. But the way in which we communicate that, again, I mentioned we've got SME teams. So I spoke to them when we spoke about sharing insights, but equally it's kind of dual system. So what I mean by that is kind of the SMEs will share insights to the relevant teams that they'll be paired with to give feedback on customer contacts. But equally, the teams will give updates to the SMEs, say, look, these are the things that are changing this week, next week, and they'll then go and disseminate that through the agents, update the knowledge bases, update the training. So it's all about that kind of closed feedback loop between each of the departments as well is obviously incredibly important.
Yeah, I've always wondered, especially companies that are rapidly developing like their product, how they keep everything up to date, all the knowledge bases. And just someone as simple as like we use HubSpot, and they have millions of knowledge base articles, and then you come across some and it's like only very few are outdated. So I'm like very impressed that it's not.
It's a lot of intentional effort. I don't think there's kind of anything super smart behind it. I think a lot of the times it's just really intentional effort to do.
Maybe that would be a good NLP tool, just to identify knowledge bases that need updating.
There we go.
Well, awesome. Thank you very much. Is there anything else that you'd like to share on that subject?
I could probably talk your ear off for another 45 minutes or so, but no, I think we've covered a lot in there already. There's always, like I say, within customer care space, there's so many kind of, I know we've focused more specifically on technology, but like I say, I think there's so many areas within the customer care space where technology can automate, enhance, or kind of unlock potential for customers and agents as well. But no, I don't think there's anything else specific.
Cool. Well, maybe we have to get you back on the podcast another time and talk about different subjects.
Unless you're sick of me already.
Cool. Well, thanks. It's been so interesting to hear about your approach to, like the customer-centric lens of customer support and how you do things. So thank you very much.
Absolutely great talking it through with you.